Okay, at Gias Manzil, Baba had built, according to his specifications, a cage similar to the one that Upasni Maharaj had used at Sakori. It was constructed of bamboo poles in one corner of the large room on the upper floor. Um, on January 9th, 1930, Baba entered into seclusion in this cage, saying that certain work in the non physical realms prompted him to confine himself in a small area. Um, the women visited him only once during the 22 days he remained in the cage. When they arrived, they went upstairs and talked with Baba for about a half an hour. They did not go near the cage, but had his darshan from
J
afar.
Lala. I was
Uh,
putting in Dondy.
oh, okay. Well, welcome, Rosalie. They did not go near the cage, but had his darshan from afar, joined hands to him, and left. On 30th of January, Baba ended his seclusion and visited the women in their quarters before leaving for Ahmednagar. The next day, while at Meherabad, although he had shifted the women, sorry, uh, and some of the men to Nasik, Baba stated, in the future, Meherabad will be like Jerusalem. For my spiritual work, it is the best possible place. It will always be the center of my work. He returned to Nasik on 1st February, but 4 days later he went into seclusion again, where he remained until his 36th birthday celebration on 17th February, when he stepped out of this seclusion for good. Lovers came from all over for the celebration, and one invited Baba to visit Kolhapur. He accepted and went, but on the way back, the Mandali's bus nearly slid off a cliff. A near fatal accident was averted when they took Baba's name. Baba observed, travels with me involve great privations. The harassment that I give is greater during my travels, and it is while traveling that my greatest work is done. Before leaving Nasik on 2nd April for Meherabad, Baba instructed the women, along with Rustam, Frani, and their children, to move out of the Brahmin woman's house and into Gias Manzil. Frani's family lived upstairs while Mera, Khorshid, and Najas stayed downstairs. The entire house was unfurnished, but the women were comfortable in the large bedrooms. The rooms upstairs were equally grand, there was a broad terrace. From Meherabad, Baba went to Panchgani near Marbaleshwar, where he had a cave constructed on the side of a hill for his seclusion work, which this time he said had to do with the social and political upheavals in India and abroad. On 15th May, Baba entered his seclusion in Tiger Valley Cave. While Baba was away in Panchgani, Mara's thoughts were always with him. How must Baba be feeling in seclusion in the cave in the middle of the summer, she mused. Because local people were flocking to the cave for darshan, and it was raining heavily every night, Baba left on 26 May for Meherabad, in where he again sat in seclusion. He was also suffering from a toothache and had several teeth extracted during this period. Adi Sr. drove Mehra, Mani, and Khorshid to Mehrabad to see Baba on 28th May. The next day, Franey wrote to Baba, Mehra wants to know if you will apply almond oil to your hair, as she has some with her that she can send and will be glad if you use it during these hot summer days. In the meantime, Pila Mai from Karachi and her 3 children, plus Sunamasi, who had been away in Bombay, had come to stay with the women in Gias Manzil, so the house was full. Daulat Mai, Pila Mai, and Nadja did the cooking for the women, while Franey's family, who had exclusive use of the dining room, ate separately. The women had been told not to mix with Rustam or any guests who happened to visit the family. Mara was not particularly close to her sister's children, though she talked and played with her niece Meru, who was about 3 at the time. I kept a bit aloof from my sister's family. I didn't go to their house because her husband was there. Baba saw that we kept a spiritual atmosphere of Meherabad at Nasik. But they did have guests of their own, such as Baba's sister Mani, when she had school holidays. At 11, Mani was already an accomplished mimic. One of her antics that Rustam particularly enjoyed was for her to dress in a sadra and sari like an elderly Irani woman and imitate the old-fashioned Persian style of singing. Mani dipped into a snuff box for extra effect and pretended to for added effect and pretended to take some. Mani's act was so amusing that Rustam made her do it repeatedly for friends. Although Rustam was fond of music, he could not carry a tune. But he wrote a song about Baba called Meher Raj, Meher's Reign. Um, the song today is known as Meher Raj Arti. He asked Mani, who was quite musical, to fit a tune to it and sing it before Baba. From Gias Manzil, the women could see the river, and unlike Pigeon House, they sometimes went for a walk there. Baba had also given permission for an occasional outing, and since Nasik is the center of grape cultivation, Rustam took the women in a bus to a nearby vineyard. Baba had not been to Nasik for more than 2 months when he arrived on 12th June for just one day, before again journeying to Kashmir. He met Daulat Mai and Franey. Another, so, and it was perhaps at this time he told Daulat Mai to live with Franey and help her with her children. Another daughter, Nagu, had been born. Franey had many children by now, all mischievous, said Mara. As he had done with Gustaji, Baba also gave Daulat Mai the order to observe silence, which was never lifted. She continued to do her own shopping using a slate to communicate. When she first began keeping silence, Mani started talking to her, asking her what was for lunch that day. By mistake, Daulat Mai said some word like rice. She made one mistake and then kept absolute silence for the next 22 years until she died in 1952. Eugene or Rosalie, would you like to pick up? I have to leave early, so I I don't want to.
Sure. Rustum had spoken to Baba about his idea of making a movie. to portray spiritual themes and to spread Baba's teaching throughout the world. Baba liked the idea, but instead of making a movie, construction was begun in June on a movie theater, Circle Cinema, that Rustam would own, but that the Mandali would operate. Oh, back to the sidebar. Mehra stated that Baba permitted Dalit Mai to break her silence a few days before she dropped her body, but Mehra was unaware of it. Chanji's brother, Narji Duttachanji, an engineer from Bombay, was given the contract for the construction of the theater. He began commuting between Bombay and Nasik to supervise the work, and he often brought his wife, Bakamai, and their three young daughters, Arnavaz, Rhoda Mistry, and Nargis, whenever they had a holiday. They visited the women Mandali, and if Baba was there, had his darshan. Arnavaz had seen the women once before at the post office when she was about 8, but has no memory of it. Her first memory of Mehra is during this time at Nasik, when she was 12. Arnavaz was taken to the women's quarters with her mother and sisters. The first person who greeted them was Mehra. Mehra was dressed very simply. She took us inside their room and showed us a song or poem written by Baba, which she read out and explained. It was something so tender between us. I remember her as something so special, though I had absolutely no idea about her status then. She was so young and beautiful. It is so vivid in my memory, even today. After visiting Kashmir, Baba returned to Nasik via Mehrabad on 14 July. He was not quite well from his work, Mehra recalled. We hadn't seen him for a month. He kept to his room, sitting and talking with the men. Scroll, please. Thanks so much. Mostly Gulmai and Sunamasi would be with him to nurse him. We only went when Baba called us, not much on our own in those days. Wanting a change, Baba left Nasik on 20 August for Calcutta to go sightseeing with Aga Ali. And he also contacted the Jesawala family and their young son Erich in Nagpur. Returning to Nasik 6 weeks later, he instructed the women to move back to the Brahmin's house, while Rustam, Frani, and their family were to continue living at Gyas Manzil. This time the women did not occupy the pigeon house, but stayed in the main bungalow that Rustam's family had vacated, the other half of which was still being used by the landlady. The women's portion of the house consisted of 3 rooms, and here too they had no furniture, only a few benches and chairs on the broad veranda. In one of the larger bedrooms at the front, the women slept on mattresses on a carpet. In the morning, their beddings were rolled and stacked in a corner. Bead curtains were hung on the windows to allow the breeze to enter. Enclosing the back veranda with bamboo matting made a storeroom for their luggage. And there was another storeroom near the kitchen, separate from the house. During the next 3 years, the women led a strict and secluded life here, except when going from the house to the kitchen or to the toilet. They were always inside, day and night. Although there was a garden with an expanse of open space in front of their bungalow, they never ventured there because of the main road nearby. We lived like fakirs at this time, Mehra said. We kept our bedding rolls wrapped up in gunny sacks. We worked in the kitchen all morning. The women also had to cover themselves at all times. This was to test us. Some hardship was imposed so that life with Baba, wouldn't be easy. Baba would test us to do something that was very difficult, to ameliorate the conditions, as with the badminton and cricket games at Mehrabad. A ping pong table was brought and kept in the house. Baba told them to play for half an hour each day. Marvelous sadhana, play ping pong. Baba had also told Ramju and his family to move into the pigeon house, which gave the women some company. Although the women never saw Ramju, when Baba was away, his wife, Khatija, their baby Ali, and Khatija's sister Haja visited the women in the evenings to talk about Baba or to sing. Haja also helped with the cooking. They had other visitors too, such as Dina Talati, Kak Saheb's wife, Zora Bai, and Shireen Mai, who took one look at little Ali Ramju's bright green eyes and observed, "That child has the eyes of a cat." When Baba returned to Nasik on 1 October, he stayed only for 4 days before leaving again. In fact, during the next 6 months, Meher Baba was at the women, Meher Baba was traveling constantly during the next 6 months, visiting Nasik for only a day at a time, every few weeks. Since there was no room for Baba to spend the night at the women's house, he slept at Gyas Manzil with Frainie's family, but he had his meals and bathed at the women's bungalow. He usually arrived by 11 a.m. Mehera kept Baba's trunk and belongings ready. When he bathed, she put his towel, soap, and clothes in the bathroom. Downstairs on the veranda, the girls made a seat for him out of a thin mattress on a carpet. And since there was no table, he had his meals here also, which Naja cooked with Mehera assisting. The women sat on low stools, their plates balanced on their laps, or sat on the floor. They massaged Baba's feet, and in the afternoon or evening, he returned to Frainie's to be with the Mandali. Mehera remembered her mother taking her to the women's bungalow. I always loved to go see them. Years later, I remembered each of the women's names after having not seen them for some years. When Meru was small, she once asked Baba when he would speak and then remarked, "You know, Baba, I've never heard you speak." Baba promised he would break his silence soon, and Meru believed him. A year passed with no breaking of the silence, and again she asked about it. Again, he managed to convince her that the following year he would speak. Baba often played with Frainie's children, paying particular attention to Falu, Meru, and Nagu, who were destined to stay with him in later years. One game played was called Rachel and Jacob. 2 players are blindfolded in a circle, and by calling out to Rachel and hearing her response, Jacob tries to catch her as others in the circle shout directions. Round and round the couple circled, fleeing and seeking each other's embrace, while Baba and Mehera watched and clapped encouragement. Rosalie, would you care to continue?
Yeah. Sometimes a peculiar looking boy came to Rustam and Franie's house, and Baba revealed that the boy had been a yogi in a previous birth. The boy wore a shirt and langoti, loincloth, and in a pouch at his waist carried non-poisonous snakes that he let loose in their compound. Then he stuck his fingers in his ears, called the snakes back, and returned them to his pouch. Meru, her brothers and sisters were mesmerized. Baba instructed Dalit Mai and Frainie to feed the boy if he wanted anything to eat, but he only ate fruit. Sometimes he asked for money, which Frainie knew he did not want for himself, but for the other young boys who demanded it of him so they could ride bicycles. The boy himself was fascinated with mirrors, and he gazed into one, stuck his fingers in his ears, and made strange noises.
And there we have Gulmai and her daughter-in-law Franny in the
Wow.
1930s.
There's Russo. Wow.
Me, me, Franny, Melu, Baba, Meru, Falu, Rustum, and Nagu.
So Meru's
Okay.
on the floor at Baba's feet. Huh?
I don't know which one is Meru.
Well, it goes Meru, and then it mentions the boy's name.
Falu.
Falu, yeah. So that's her at his feet there.
But what about Melu? Who's Melu?
Which one? Melu?
Yeah.
That's our first child to
Uh-huh.
Baba's right there. I mean,
Okay.
yeah.
Oh, this is a cute one.
Oh, and then a baby. Boy, he had a lot. They had a lot of children.
They did. Mhm.
Mm.
To the
Marseille.
west.
To the west. One day, Mara felt extremely cold and began shivering. Then, every alternate day at the same time, she had a high temperature. It was malaria. They were not allowed to summon a doctor, but she was given periodic doses of quinine, which helped to control the fever. Someone suggested drinking plenty of milk also, which Mara did not care for. Baba was not in Nasik at the time, but when he came, he was informed of Mara's illness, which no one else had contracted. He brought quinine and gave her 2 more tablets and some milk mixed with soda water. As Mara had a temperature that day, she had taken a dose of quinine just 10 minutes before he arrived. Quinine is not supposed to be taken in large amounts, and soon Mara's ears started ringing. Baba scolded the others. Why didn't you tell me she had already been given a dose? The fever subsided, but the quinine continued to hammer in her head. Baba bent over Mara and held spoonfuls of orange juice to her lips. The following day, Mara was feeling much better, and Baba departed for his work. But the day after, the fever returned. The sidebar says some people suffer severe reactions to quinine, even at normal doses. And
Oh,
a single large dose can be fatal. Wow.
wow. What was wrong with her?
Malaria.
Oh, malaria.
Baba's elderly father, Shariarji, was also ill. Shireen Mai wished him to have a change. So he was brought to Nasik and stayed with the women for a few weeks. Khorshid's mother, Sunamasi, was adept at nursing, and Shireen Mai knew that under her care, Shariarji would recover quickly. And you want to scroll a little, please? Sunamasi's bed was placed in Shariarji's room so that she could attend to him. Feeling weak, Shariarji sat each morning on the veranda in a corner by the railing. The girls nodded to him as they passed on their way to the kitchen. Shariarji knew that Mara was not feeling well. From his vantage point on the veranda, he watched as Khorshid and Naja scurried back and forth to Mara's room. Mara has a fever, they remarked to him, and it won't come down. Today it is very high. Shariarji replied, if I am allowed to come inside, I can bring down her temperature. He was told that he would not be allowed near her bed, but he said, I won't touch her or stand close to her bed. I know a kalam, prayer, that will break the fever. May I come and recite it? I'm going to read the sidebar. Tina. Franny had given the women a 3-tiered bunk bed that her children had used. Sinamasi slept on the lower bed. If Mani came for a visit, she liked to climb to the top bed and sleep there, while the middle bed was used for storage. Almost like a commercial break. Shariarji, they agreed, and Shariarji was led inside. Mehera was lying down, semi-conscious, with her eyes closed. Shariarji stood and softly repeated a prayer in a mixture of Persian and Arabic, meant specially for removing fever and maintaining good health. Then he went to his own room. Cold washcloths were placed on Mehera's forehead. Though the prayer was just 4 lines and took only a few minutes to recite, Shariarji had said it with such fervent faith and love that by the same evening, the fever was completely gone. The next day, it did not return. In fact, the fever never came back, and Mehera was cured. Baba was pleased when he was told what had transpired. I read the sidebar. More than 20 years later, Mehera would also attribute her speedy recovery from the 1952 automobile accident in Oklahoma to Shariarji's kalam. From that day on, Mehera stated, not only have I never had malaria, but I have never had any type of high fever or serious illness again. Shariarji explained that it was Zoroaster who had given these special prayers. Shariarji knew another prayer meant for ghosts or haunted places, which, if recited, protected one against such spirits. Quotes, if a ghost is present, hold your hands in a fist and recite this kalam, he told the girls. The place will no longer be haunted. Mehera wished to remember the prayer given to her, and Shariarji dictated it to someone who wrote it down. Shariarji said that the paper with the prayer on it should be touched only with clean hands, and that for it to be effective, the woman must not be menstruating at the time of recitation. The person who says the kalam must have faith and pray wholeheartedly to God for it to work. For some time, Mehera recited the prayer every day after taking a bath. She learned it by heart, but forgot it later. For many years, she preserved the paper in her cupboard, but it was misplaced subsequently. While in Nasik, Shariarji sometimes entertained the women with stories, such as this one. In the middle of the night, he heard a noise. He woke and saw 2 shining eyes peering at him out of the darkness. It was a tiger. Shariarji stared at it, repeating, Yezdan, Yezdan. The tiger stared back without moving. They remained facing each other for the remainder of the night. And at dawn, the tiger inexplicably turned and stalked away. Mehera was highly impressed. She knew all about the dangers of dealing with tigers from her father's encounters. Quotes, "What courage, what strength, what determination Shariarji had." Mehera commented in admiration. It took real devotion to become a dervish, to leave home and wander through the jungles of Persia and India, begging for his food. Though Baba used to catch cold very easily, his father had a strong constitution. Mani recalled that her father always chose, quotes, "the cracked egg, the apple with the spot on it, the ripest banana," and quickly put it on his plate, never saying anything. As a child, she noticed such selfless acts. By chance, the women had their own buffalo in Nasik. Someone owed Sunamasi money from years before. Reasoning that all her property now belonged to Baba, Sunamasi kept writing the party, demanding payment. The person wrote back of their inability to pay the amount in cash, but in repayment of the debt, they offered a Jafrabadi water buffalo, a good breed. Sunamasi, with Baba's permission, accepted. The buffalo was enormous, Mehera recalled. It resembled a small elephant. She gave 18 seers of milk a day, so we had fresh milk, but we never dared milk her. Walu, the Arangan village woman, was with the women, and fortunately, she knew how to milk cows. The buffalo was kept in a shed under a few trees on the edge of their compound, and Walu gave it fodder and bathed it. A Gauli herdsman was employed to help her, since the buffalo had to be led to the river to wash it. Mani too remembered the animal. "I used to do my homework sitting on top of it." The others said, "Why do you want to sit on the buffalo? When you come down, you smell like a buffalo." I'll always remember that it was Mehera who said, "If Mani wants to sit on a buffalo, let her sit on a buffalo." In things like that, Mehera was so considerate. Mehera knew how Mani felt, since she too had enjoyed riding a buffalo at her grandmother's house. The sidebar says, when the women left Nasik, the buffalo was brought to Meherabad. Thus, another theme that was to become increasingly important emerged in Nasik: keeping a menagerie of pets. Even with all this fresh milk available, the women never ate butter in Nasik. Although Baba had never said not to eat it, Baba's gopis gave all their butter to him. Mehera explained, quotes, "Because we didn't have it at Meherabad." I need more words, please. Although we didn't have it at Meherabad, we thought we must stick to that regime. We were young and very naive in those days. At home, I loved to eat butter. I preferred it to cream. I never cared for cream, though my mother would give it to us on porridge. In Nasik, we had to boil so much milk and the cream was so thick. We gathered it, but we never ate it. I took the buttermilk and churned the dye yogurt into butter. The butter was meant for Baba, so I never even tasted it, though my mouth was watering to see all that lovely fresh butter.
Hold on. I know I'm up to scrolling, but I need to do something. Okay.
Okay.
I hear birds.
Yeah, there are birds there outside. We did, oh, where am I? Baba, I was
Well,
gonna
wouldn't
say,
mind.
Baba
Baba-
would have minded me eating some of it. But in those days, we felt guilty to use something meant for Baba. We did make ghee out of the butter and cooked our food and Baba's food in it. We never had to send for oil from the bazaar. The women continued to wear cotton saris in Nasik as they had done at Meherabad. Their blouses were long sleeved, no part of their arm was to be seen. None of their clothing was made by a tailor. They had a sewing machine to stitch their own garments, and everything was made by them, including petticoats, blouses, and so on. In those days, said Mara, when we were young, we didn't have nice, colorful skirts to wear, which we have now when we are older. It is ironic. Then it was always a white cloth on our heads and plain saris. Big Khorshid, too, was a frequent visitor at Nasik. After doing her share in the kitchen, like peeling and chopping onions, Big Khorshid sewed things for each one. Impatient by nature, after asking each what they wanted, and taking their measurements, she sewed quickly. Mani recalled her sister-in-law's contribution. Big Khorshid did a lot of work in Nasik. Franny bought rough cloth, which we use for lungis, loose pajama-like pants worn under a dress as an undergarment. The sidebar says Baba too often wore lungis instead of boxer shorts in the early days. Franny cut the long bolts of cloth and Big Khorshid sewed them. She worked hard for hours, not on a pedal machine, but on an old-fashioned hand-operated one. There was no table or chair. She operated it sitting on a low pot or patla stool.
Yeah, I have to leave soon, so could somebody else take over as host?
Eugene?
Hey, Tina, why don't we just finish early? It'll be good.
Okay. Is that a good solution?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, so
Yeah,
we're on page 232. And I'm sorry you didn't get to read, Mona.
it's okay. Today was good to listen. Thanks, Tina. Hi, Rosalie. Hi, Eugene.
Hi, Mona.
32.
I must dash. See you next week.
Okay, see you next.
Bye, Jai Baba.
Hi,
Jai
Jai Baba.
Jai Baba.
Jai Baba.
Bye, Tina. Good.
Hi, Mona. Nice to see you, and I'll be longer next week.
Yeah, yeah.